And now, marine weather around Alaska. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan with your marine weather outlook coming up here for the rest of this weekend, Sunday into Monday. And starting with the sea ice, we are seeing early ice develop along areas of the Arctic and Chukchi coastline, as well as within some of the inlets around Norton and Kotzebue Sounds, as well as along portions of the YK Delta. But still, ice is very early in its early stage of development. And even though we have had some colder temperatures, overall we expect our temperatures to average a bit above normal here as we head into the first several days of November across much of the state. We've seen temperatures this Saturday afternoon as warm as 40 degrees as far north as Cape Lisburne. So there's some fairly mild air along areas of the west coast where there's also been a little bit of light rain falling, and we expect that trend to continue. There's an area of low pressure sitting out in the central Bering Sea. This low is slowly going to drift off toward the north-northwest and be located up into the Gulf of Anadyr on the east side of Russia there as we get into early Tuesday morning. And secondary low coming up out of the North Pacific is going to pass just southwest of Kodiak Island later tonight and on Sunday before another impulse or energy lifts up to the north and forms a weak low over the Gulf here early next week. The big warm ridge of high pressure has shifted a little further south and east and not quite as amplified as it was the past couple of weeks, but it's now sitting over the Panhandle, western northwest Canada, and it will tend to stay that way for a while. And that means, at least on the west side of the state, we will see some precipitation. Breeziest conditions coming up here will be along areas of the Gulf Coast as we go into Sunday, associated with this feature as the pressure gradient tightens as this weak low lifts northward. We also have a cold front that's going to be working its way eastward across the Arctic coast and North Slope Sunday into Sunday night, and that'll be accompanied by a band of light snow showers that could be mixed with a little freezing drizzle or freezing rain, but nothing that would amount to too much. And then finally, as we get into Sunday afternoon, we are looking for that front to push across the area and into Monday. It finally clears into far northern Canada. And we find generally a ridge of high pressure from the Arctic Ocean cutting across into western Canada. Here's that other low taking shape here across the Gulf with some light precipitation along the Gulf Coast into parts of the Panhandle, and then that low lifting out of the central Bering up toward the Gulf of Anadyr by late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. So the marine forecast, wind and waves here coming up Sunday for the inner channels of the Panhandle. Variable winds around 5 knots, Stevens Passage, Lynn Canal, waves a foot or two. Northwest winds to 10 knots, waves a foot or two around Ketchikan, Metlakatla. And then to the west, we expect the outer coast. Winds will be generally east-southeast 20 to as high as 25 to 30 knots once you get north and west of Gustavus off the coast there of Yakutat Bay toward Cape Suckling. Waves up this way could run as high as 7 to 11 feet, otherwise 5 to 6 feet. And for Monday, winds turn northerly, 10 knots with waves a foot or two in Lynn Canal. Southeast winds 10 to 15 knots, Stevens Passage and down toward Dixon Entrance with waves running a couple of feet. The outer coast will see a little stronger winds. Look for southeast to east winds, strongest there west of Gustavus and up toward Cape Suckling to 30 knots with waves there 10 to 12 feet. For the northwestern Gulf, winds will be easterly 30 knots, though as high as 40 knot northeast to easterly gales there at the entrance of Cook Inlet and just northeast of Kodiak City. Easterly winds to 20 knots with 3-4 foot waves, Prince William Sound, and northeast winds to 20 knots. Upper Cook Inlet could see waves 3 to 5 feet. Again, as high as 10 feet once you get down there toward Kamishak Bay and the entrance of Cook Inlet. For Monday, winds and waves do come down a bit. We expect more of a northeasterly flow across the region. Winds 25 knots off the Kenai, 10 knot northeast winds with waves running a couple feet in Prince William Sound. Along the length of the Cook Inlet, we're looking for north-northeast winds 15 to 20 knots with waves as high as 7 to 8 feet from off of Anchor Point down to near the entrance there of Cook Inlet. Across Kodiak Island on Sunday, east winds, east-southeast winds 25 to 30 knots, waves 8 feet to Shelikof Strait, 13 feet well off of Akiak. And then as we go down along the length of the Alaska Peninsula, there's a little bit of a trough, a lull, so the winds are variable at 10 knots, waves 5 to as high as 9 feet on the North Pacific side, generally 3 to 4 feet on the Bering side. And then for Monday, winds will be northeasterly in the vicinity of Kodiak Island at 20 knots, waves 7 to 8 feet. And as we go down along the length of the Alaska Peninsula, generally northeast winds will continue, especially there, either side, Cold Bay and False Pass, with waves of 4 to 5 feet. For the eastern Aleutians, variable winds, northerly 15 knots, northwesterly, generally speaking, 10 to 15 knots, becoming more westerly, Atka and Adak westward, and as high as 25 knots once you get up east of Kiska and towards Shimia, with waves there as high as 10 to 11 feet. And on Monday, winds will generally be out of the north across the eastern Aleutians at 15 knots, turning westerly once you get toward Atka and Ada westward at 15 knots. Waves generally running 5 to 7 feet on the North Pacific side and 5 to 7 feet on the Bering side. For the southwest coast, including the Pribilov Islands, south winds to 15 knots at St. Paul, St. George, waves 5 to 6 feet there. East winds 25 knots within Bristol Bay. Southeast 25 knots, Kuskokwim Bay, waves 4 to as high as 6 feet as you get offshore there. And then along the lower Yukon Delta, look for southeast winds at 20 knots, waves running 3 to 4 feet. And on Monday, winds will be more southwesterly, St. Matthew down through St. Paul at 15 to 20 knots, waves 5 to 6 feet. East winds come down to 15 knots within Bristol Bay, waves a couple of feet. South winds 10 knots there at Kuskokwim Bay with waves a couple of feet. And then off of the Yukon Delta, south winds to 15 knots, waves 3 feet, and southeast winds across Norton Sound at up to 20 knots with waves of 3 to 4 feet. For areas on the north side of St. Lawrence Island, south of the Bering Strait, east winds 20 to 25 knots, waves 5 to 6 feet. Southeast winds 15 to 20 knots, lower Chukchi Sea, and then they kind of flip around, become west-southwest as you go from north of Point Lay, Wainwright, Utqiagvik, all the way over to Kaktovik, and waves generally in ice-free areas, they're running around 4 feet. And on Monday, look for winds to be westerly up at Kaktovik at 15 knots, but northerly Prudhoe Bay back toward Utqiagvik. Winds then turn easterly through the Chukchi Sea at 20 to 25 knots, waves 4 to 6 feet, and then easterly winds 15 to 20 knots, passing down south of the Bering Strait to the north side of St. Lawrence, with waves generally running around 3 to 4 feet.